Well, it's 10 o'clock. We're still short a couple of, oh, no, just one. Well, let's go ahead and start. Are we ready?
Yes. Are you ready, Chair?
You bet. So welcome to the July 21st policy session. And Gary, what's up?
Yes, we'll start with roll call. Chair Bernard.
Here.
Commissioner Savas.
Here.
Commissioner Fisher.
Here.
Commissioner Humberston.
Here.
All right. First, we have coronavirus update. Nancy Bush, Director of Disaster Management and Incident Commander of the Emergency Operations Center, will begin.
Good morning, everyone. So we'll start out with our numbers today. So in Oregon, there's 14,847 positives, 262 deaths, and 325 and 197 negatives. Clackamas County has 1,141 positives, which is up 41 since Friday. There are 30 deaths, 31,491 negatives. Multnomah County has 3,566 positives. They are up 281 since Friday. 75 deaths, which is up 1 since Friday. 72,388 negatives. Washington County has 2,246 positives. That's up 141. 21 deaths, which is up 1, and 45,876 negatives. Statewide, we have 155 that are hospitalized that are COVID positives, and that is up 9 since Friday. We have 55 of those are in ICU beds. 155 are on vents. And statewide, there's 162 adult ICU beds available out of 776. There are 782 ventilators available statewide as well. To go through a little bit of what's going on here in the EOC, just to talk a little bit, we have a new section in our situation report. I don't know if you noticed it, where we talk about our weekly accomplishments and things that we've done over the last week. So we distributed 480 food boxes, 50 mobile showers. We had 12 Go team visits, and they had 44 contacts during those visits. There were 22 PPE requests received, and we processed 13 of those. And then, of course, we continue to process those this week as well that we weren't able to fill last week. Finance is working on the next round of the CARES dollars, which is due to the state on Friday. And they are reaching out to all of our department directors here at the county to make sure we get everything in that we can. Our liaison branch is working with some community coordinators or CBOs, community-based organizations, that OHA is now, they did direct contracts with them. So they're doing some outreach there to see how we can pull our efforts together to serve our communities. Logistics is working with social services on the voucher program, and we're hoping to get some bids in for that in the very near future. And we are also expecting a push of PPE from Oregon Emergency Management, which we do know has gowns. We're very happy to report. We don't know how many yet or what we're going to be getting, but we do know it does have some gowns in it. Public health continues to work outbreaks, including some long-term care facilities. 13 workplace outbreaks to 16, and then 2 child care agencies. And it was reported this morning that OHA is going to make some of the outbreaks public. We don't know which ones yet, but some of those will be coming public very soon. And we continue to work with the schools on planning and reviews. And we do have a meeting with the schools later on today to talk through some of those processes as well. Our PIOs are working on updating our website and are going to, we'll be including all of the new openings for the offices. Framing conversation with the governor's office regarding the lack of CARES funding as well. And I will stop there and entertain any questions.
Nancy, do we know when the governor's going to have her conference or news conference?
All we know right now, I've heard it's going to be tomorrow.
Oh, okay.
But that has not been confirmed.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll jump in. I got my hand up there. Excuse me. So I just kind of want to talk about a couple things, but I want to just give you some numbers just to kind of put it in perspective of my point I'm trying to make here. So since we last met Thursday, the count for Clackamas County new cases is 92 total. For Multnomah County, it's 491. And then for Washington County, it's 255. So basically, Washington County is 2.5 times our numbers, more than 2.5 times our numbers, and Multnomah County is 5-6 times our numbers. So I don't want to conflate the coupling or the decoupling with whether or not we stay in a phase or move to another phase or whatnot. And I think that when I read the piece, or wherever I picked that up, that 2 of our state representatives asked the governor to decouple, that doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, we're ready to go into phase 2. And certainly that I don't think that we're ready to fold back into lockdown or phase 0, if you will. So I think the decoupling works both ways. When you've got basically a county, one of our neighboring counties that is doing so poorly with their numbers, that we should be dragged down if we are well within a range. So just yesterday's numbers, just to give you an idea, yesterday we had 11 cases, Multnomah County had 85. That's almost 8 times the number. And Washington County had 38. That's more than 3 times our number. So yeah, as an example, I'm just saying that I think that there's merit in being decoupled, in that if the governor, and it might be called for, is to maybe take counties that are in phase 1 and roll them back into phase 0. And I think that what comes to the top of the list, if you look at the state numbers, is Multnomah County. So that's my one point I wanted to make. And the other one, which is, Nancy, appreciate our conversation yesterday. It was a good conversation. I really appreciate the work you're doing. But what we talked about yesterday, acknowledgement that the testing capacity in the state, it's even on the news, that the testing capacity is going down when the need is going up. That's significant. And I think that's why maybe there is a call to move back selectively and surgically some of the counties that are not faring so well. The other aspect of that is the tracing. We're not doing so well there either, and whether it's willingness. So I've got an idea, and maybe someone could pitch this to the governor, to the state. Why aren't we asking the people that are getting the test for all their contact tracing type information out of the gate? If the limited tracing, or not, excuse me, if the limited testing is only applied to those that are, you know, suspected, or may have symptoms or have a higher propensity of having it, I mean, it would be great value, and making it basically an offer. Hey, we'll do the testing for free, or the requirement for testing is tell us all the people contacts in the last 3 weeks. And by the way, if you come up positive, we're going to maybe ask you to review that again. That way you've got contact with them. I think we would be way ahead if we had done that, instead of having the response saying, well, we couldn't contact those people because they wouldn't answer the phone. Well, if it's a condition of testing, we would be a week to 10 days ahead if that's how long some of the tests are staying. So what I heard Nancy say in response to a question I asked her yesterday, and if I'm making any mistake here, I don't want to put words in your mouth at all, Nancy, so I'm trying to be as respectful, but in order to expedite the testing, doing that in state would be ideal. Is that correct?
So yeah, what I did mention is that, yes, it would be very, some states are like expanding their labs where they can actually do the testing, in state. And we do have, our laboratory is doing that here in the state, but that definitely would help speed up how, the time from when the test is taken to when you get the result, as long as we have the testing kits to do the testing with.
Yeah. But, if the time spent of filling out a form and doing all the contact tracing information, let's just say that I'm applying for a test I had a friend of mine in the family that I was in contact with that had COVID, so therefore I'm needing to be tested. But if I'm asked to fill out the form, that's their time. It's not staff time, and that would actually save some time. So is there anything wrong with asking for that or suggesting that? Is there some law or something like, I mean, I'm just trying to figure out why we wouldn't do something like that if we're struggling so badly on this tracing.
Well, in public health, putting a condition on you can only get a test if you do this is not practice.
Well, even if it's an ask, so even if it's a responsible ask, it would be something that would be strongly, I mean, I would be encouraging people to do it.
Mm-hmm.
If you have mile-long cars, you know, that would delay the testing considerably if they had to fill out all those forms. And the other thing is that they may not have access to their contact phone numbers and stuff like that. There's a lot of reasons why it'd be a challenge. But all right, so it's a good idea though. I mean, it's definitely worth thinking about.
Yeah, you know, they could even finish the form and the paperwork after they leave the line.
Well, and there's also you have to think about the coordination with some of the, where also everyone is being tested and what kind of a lift that would be as well. So there would be extremely a heavy lift to coordinate with all of the health systems, et cetera, just as caveat as well.
So Ken.
I'll be brief. You know, I don't disagree with Commissioner Savas with respect to our request to decouple. All that being said, I haven't heard anything that would convince the governor and OHA to allow us to do so. The fact is that even though our numbers are smaller and going up slower, by factors of anywhere from 4 to 8, I suppose, as long as they continue to go up and we're not meeting metrics, I don't see where we provide the governor or OHA an avenue to allow us to decouple. And that I have not heard from anyone. As long as those numbers continue to go up, they're going to base their decision on that factor. And I don't see us having anything we can give them that would convince them to decouple us. So I'm open to suggestions, but I think we may all feel the same way. We'd like to be decoupled, but if we don't provide them with direct evidence that our numbers are actually going down, which they are not, I don't see how we make that happen.
Yeah.
Anybody's got any bright ideas? I'd sure like to hear them.
Tanya?
Thank you. So Nancy, I just want to make sure I'm not missing something. The last situation report had our contact tracing at 95%, which is meeting the benchmark. Is there something that I'm not understanding as to that we're not meeting the mark when it comes to contact tracing?
Yeah, so there's 2 benchmarks that are somewhat related to contact tracing. So that on that far right column, that 95%, you said that is actually initial contact with the individual to start the conversation about contact tracing. And then there is the column where it talks about being able to trace that positive back to where they got it. So that, yeah, there's been some confusion about those 2 columns. So thank you for bringing that up.
Any other questions?
So wait, just a follow-up. So I appreciated Paul's comparison across the 3 counties. It might be good to look at our populations in comparison to see where we actually are falling. I would like to know that. Where are we? Because I know Multnomah County has many more. I mean, what's their population? They're at like 800,000. I know Portland's like 600. So I would just like to see if we can, and I know that Washington County is quite a bit larger too, in proportion,
Like
based on population.
Okay, yeah. So we do have that information. I think they do it per 100,000, so we can get that.
Yeah, that would be great, because I think that would help. It would help my thinking, at least, on this. I don't know about our other commissioners. But.
Well, Washington County has 200,000 more people than we do. I know that. And I'm pretty sure Multnomah County's, it was either it was either 250,000 or 400,000 more than us, but I may be off on that one.
Paul,
Yeah, I just say, just to answer that question, is that if you recall, I had, well, actually Emily helped me with that, but we actually did the per capita of every county in the state on the numbers. And when we went, or asking to go into phase 1, I believe at that time, we were down there. We were in the lower percentile even then. And if you do the math again, you'll see we're still in the lower percentile compared to, compared to Multnomah County. So yeah, even if you think that our numbers were doubled, they're still far and away above us per capita.
I think what you said earlier today, Paul, is going to be true to Wednesday, is that the governor is going to roll back some counties to phase 1 where we are. And so I was on a conference call last night and about this issue, and also limit the size of gatherings will be rolled back. Bars will have a 10 o'clock curfew, but they're going to still be able to open. And there will be greater enforcement in grocery stores using the Department of Agriculture and OSHA in businesses, and masks indoors, outdoors, and especially at businesses. That's where people are having the issue, mostly in the workplace. So I would anticipate that you're going to hear that tomorrow. So I've got Ken and then Sonia again.
Just a quick question. Has there been any progress on getting our fair share of the CARES money without the strings attached?
No, I did talk to Senator, Kurt Schrader, Congressman Schrader this morning about that issue. No. Have we signed that agreement yet, Stephen, the IGA? I don't think so.
It's on your consent agenda for Thursday.
Okay. Until that's signed, we don't get the money, and we will sign it Thursday. That's just our first application, and then another one's due on Friday. But we figure we're going to be 45 million short. So we need that money.
Yeah.
According to Schrader, they're going to, in this next bill, specifically identify the money should go to counties and local government. So we can only hope. Sonia.
Yeah, Jim, you made me think of another question. I was really surprised that the employment department has had an outbreak because they weren't requiring their employees that were within 6 feet, couldn't maintain 6 feet distance, weren't wearing masks. And I'm just really confused as to how that happened, because as I read the governor's order, it seemed pretty clear to me that any business had to do that, or even government. And we definitely in Clackamas County were incorporating that. So I'm just curious, Nancy, I thought, oh my gosh, maybe we have a way bigger problem if the employment department didn't think they had to do that than what is happening out there with our other businesses. I'm just curious of the extent of the confusion.
Yeah, so they, I think I mentioned a little bit earlier that right now we're working on 16 workplace outbreaks, which, I don't know, of course, what the circumstances are around those, but I know that we're hearing that, the governor talked very much about the public places, but then also mentioned, though, you should be wearing a mask if you can't be with further than 6 feet from an individual. So I think that part of that is just the confusion and how some of that is written, and we interpreted it here that meant if you are, no matter where you are in our buildings, you wear a mask. So I think some of that is interpretation, and we were cautious and said, yes, you have to wear a mask. And that's how we read it. And we have other workplaces that either, if they did read it that way, they have not complied, or they didn't read it that way. So that's one of the things that we're hoping the governor will come out and say more directly that this is what is expected.
So hopefully she will do that. Is she going to have a press conference at 11 o'clock today?
I believe it's tomorrow, and I don't know if Chair Bernard has heard anything about a time.
So Paul,
Yeah, I sat in or listened in this morning on the call with Congressman Schrader, Jim, and you made a statement or said something in the statement that I would like a little bit of clarification on. You mentioned that that I guess under the scenario that we got money or we get money in the future, that we would be able to distribute it to the cities. And I know that each city does not have their own EOC, and each city does not have a lot of capacity. So I'm curious as to, is there some kind of a formula of distribution or a thought behind that? Because it would seem that, you know, there be a duplication perhaps, or a waste of those resources. And I think we need to make sure that their ability, for example, if the money goes towards business relief, for example, that you know, that all businesses in the county are getting a fair share of that, whether they're, regardless where they're located. So I don't know if there's a methodology. Is there a plan behind that?
so Paul, I said it would be nice if the federal government gave counties some money so that they can consider supporting the small businesses in the cities or giving money to the cities. Of course, there's no formula. I mean, I'm not going to do the math until we hear something like we're going to get money. If the federal government gives us money, we could have the opportunity to support small businesses in the county.
Well, I'm pretty sure I heard what I heard. Maybe I didn't. Maybe I made a mistake, but I didn't hear the word business in that statement. All I heard was cities.
Well, okay, cities.
Okay. Well, all I can say, but just getting back to the big picture here, I certainly hope that that the governor is very selective and surgical about which county she rolls back, and I just hope that we don't get punished for the good work we've done, and that's why I think that decoupling is such a big deal.
All right.
And I also asked to forward the idea or the concept of asking people to volunteer their contacts in the last 3 weeks. So we have that in advance. Any additional contact information, so we don't just get someone not answering the phone. We got to act on behalf of the public health. And the faster we can respond to that, the better. And Nancy, could you just speak to the impacts of how significant a 2-day or 3-day delay in the test results are, as far as that person be able to spread the virus?
No, I cannot speak to that, but I could have Dr. President speak to that on Thursday.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Can we let her go? Yeah.
Not yet. So remaining on COVID, next, commissioners, is to review your COVID-19 emergency declaration and decide if you want to extend it. It currently expires July 31st. And if you do extend it, if you want to add some suggested language that staff provided to you yesterday. So I'll ask Stephen and Nancy to please review the changes and then lead the discussion.
Nancy, want me to go?
Yes, please.
Morning, commissioners. As Gary explained, your current emergency declaration concerning COVID, it expires at the end of this month. And if the board were interested in extending it, we have prepared an addendum number 4 to the original resolution. And we don't have a date that we put in there, but if you were to extend it, it maybe would go to the end of August or to the end of September. What we did do is we added some additional whereas language in the proposed draft that I sent you yesterday. That was language coming from the EOC folks, and that's at the bottom of page 1, and it basically expands upon the need for additional funding and the reasons for that. Schools, social supports, long-term care facilities, small businesses, and things along those lines. It's not an additional measure, it's more of a recital. What this addendum also does, it continues with all of the original or the 12 adopted emergency measures. They all remain in place, and there's 2 additional proposed ones. One is number 13, which is aligned with the special legislation that came down with this last session to allow for video conferencing, such as this Zoom meeting, to conduct not just public hearings, but other county functions, code enforcement, land use, planning commission. We would not have those in person. By this order, we would say that these types of functions and hearings would be compliant with public record or public meetings law if it were done by telephonic or video conferencing technology or other virtual means. That would also apply to your special districts, West Folks, NCPRD, things along those lines. So that's kind of a catch-all for that, and it would basically trickle down what this board does and allow the other, I'm getting some thing here, okay, and allow other entities to use that type of technology to conduct their meetings. Number 14 is one that comes from planning, and the language there, certainly both of these are open for the board's discussion. The language there is intended to allow commercial, industrial, or institutional uses a bit more flexibility to maintain their operations or initiate their operations during this COVID emergency. And it would grant to the Board of County Commissioners the ability to waive certain zoning development ordinance requirements. And I had invited Jennifer Hughes and Dan Jackson to come to speak to this because they have more specifics as to the actual type of request. But what was explained to me, commissioners, was that let's say churches wanted to hold services outside under a tent or other structure. Could they use their allotted parking space to accommodate that type of use? Same with restaurants, from what I understand. They would have them outside, taking up some assigned parking spaces and things along those lines. This language is, it provides the board with a lot of flexibility. There's not a lot of objective criteria, but if this were a concept that the board supported and you wanted more specific language in there, we could certainly do that in short order. We just wanted to gauge your reaction to this type of emergency measure. And if Jennifer or Dan are here, maybe they can be brought in to speak further to that. But this emergency addendum would need to be adopted certainly before the expiration of the current July 30th timeframe. So, and if we had any additional measures the board were interested in including on this, certainly now would be the time to do that. And I see Dan and Jennifer both are here to maybe answer some questions with respect to 14, or we're able to answer any other the board might have. Thank you.
Just a little information to add, just to make sure we understand.
Can I just jump in real fast? I'm sorry. Could staff or someone send me that? I missed that. I've been overwhelmed with some other things.
I can do that right now, Paul.
Yeah, please. Thank you.
Just to clarify, and Jen, if you want to expand on this, please do, but we aren't getting a sizable number of these requests. We're just trying to think strategically and proactively in regards to our businesses and small businesses. The ZDO doesn't currently allow us a lot of flexibility to simply waive those standards on a temporary basis. And that was the intent around this particular addition to the emergency declaration, is to allow some flexibility for the board, county administrator, chair, to approve some of these requests. Jen, you want to expand on that at all?
Sure. I mean, Dan's right. We haven't had a flood of these, but we have started getting questions, and staff is quite frankly feeling a lot of compassion for businesses and institutional uses trying to adapt to the governor's orders. And so we would like to be able to provide that flexibility. This would only be for temporary. So for instance, outdoor seating in required parking spaces so restaurants can achieve the social distancing. We had a church inquire. They aren't ready to do anything because the limits on the number of people who can gather would have to be increased. But if that were to happen, maybe using a tent instead of having people in an indoor space. Another thing I'm anticipating is we might get some requests from schools that want to do some kind of tents or portables to increase their ability to, separate kids into smaller groups. We haven't had that happen yet, but I think it could. And it's just very hard to, we could do a code amendment or put them through an application process for some of these things, but the timing on that is, as you all know, takes a lot longer than what people have to adapt. So that's what we were looking for.
Two more things, one of which is it doesn't exempt any use from the building code or structural code. I want to make sure we're clear about that. And then secondly, if we do get any request, we would be routing that request in coordination through public health to ensure that it's meeting all the governor's guidelines. That's all I got.
Okay. Jim, you're on mute, so my hand's up and then Ken's after mine. So I like the concept. I like the idea. I like the fact that we're being flexible. So I'm on board with that, and having it become before the Board of County Commissioners is a good idea. But what I think we need to have is some kind of guidance or clear criteria for us to make those decisions, right? That under certain conditions, and I think having some framework around that criteria in advance so that we don't just get a lot of willy-nilly stuff that maybe isn't fully baked. I'm sure that you wouldn't bring it to us, but if you had a particular person or applicant that was adamant, it might get to us anyhow, right? If they chose to circumvent staff. So that's one concern. And then the other one was just an observation. I worry as like crazy about some of the accommodations that are made. I think they're kind of cool in a way, but there's got to be some buffers around that. And that is that when they move the seating out in the street along the curb, and I just worry that if a car loses control or a truck or that there's not adequate buffer or safety things put in place. So I think having literally a table within a foot of a moving vehicle is kind of dangerous. And so if there's some accommodation being made for a buffer, then great. But that's one of the things that I've heard of that I think, and I think it's kind of cool, but if there's a buffer there, if there's no buffer there, it's dangerous. And that's just one thing that worries me. And are we on the hook for that? And I would also like to get a liability aspect that if there is an additional risk to the patrons of these businesses, whatever they may be, how we navigate that.
All right. Go ahead.
Thank you. In response to the parking, I want to make sure we're clear. We're talking about on-site parking, not parking in the right-of-way. If we had somebody request use of parking within the right-of-way, meaning the streets for folks who may be listening in, we actually would run them through a right-of-way permit process and review things of that nature. How is it going to be safe? How is it going to be buffered? So we're talking about the parking lots that are on the real property associated with these businesses. Because our ZDO just doesn't allow us the flexibility to say, yeah, you don't have to meet our parking standards, just go put tables out there. In regards to the criteria, yeah, we can take a look at that. I mean, I think fundamentally at its core, as Jennifer said, it's allowing our businesses, our religious institutions, our nonprofits, whatever it might be, flexibility within their land use authorizations to be consistent with the governor's order and still be either economically sustainable or community sustainable. I'm not sure the terminology around that, but we can work on something that can get more clarity around those objectives.
All right. Thank you. Ken and then Sonia.
Thank you. I think it's an excellent idea. I'd say be as assertive about it as possible. I'd also like to see us actually promote it. Anything that we can do to help businesses manage to stay open and survive without endangering people's safety, I'm all in on. Maintaining social distance, we all understand the basic principles that we're looking at. I can tell you that the church near where I live, the preacher stands on the front porch of the church. People drive in and park their cars, and they sit in their cars, tune their radio to whatever station he's broadcasting on, and have their church services. It was the same basic thing that we did the other day for Clackamas Women's Services and their fundraiser out at the aquatic park. Great way to operate and keeps social distancing. I think we should be as flexible as possible to help these businesses survive.
Commissioner Fisher. She's down by the lake.
I really appreciate staff actually stepping up to try and figure out some ways that we can comply with the governor's orders, but at the same time, help these businesses that we haven't been able to help because we still can't get the money from the state that we should be getting.
Commissioner Fisher.
Yeah, so I'm very much in support of this, and I do not think we should create a lot of bureaucratic criteria around this. I think it needs to be on a case-by-case basis. We need to act nimbly and quickly through our current structures, through public health and our emergency operations, and we got to keep businesses alive. And I can tell you that some of our current restrictions can really be a barrier. I belong to a health club in Lake Oswego, and the challenge for them because of the indoor classes, if they could do classes outside. So working with Lake Oswego to say, okay, well, what can we do? How can we do this? I mean, it's really important that businesses can quickly adapt to outside and social distance types of things when there are certain restrictions that we all love in a normal world, but we're in a COVID world right now. So, Stephen, I appreciate it. Looking forward to seeing the language, and maybe we need some consensus from the board to give direction about, do we want this flexible or do we want criteria? Because I think that's important for staff and for this declaration.
Well, I think it should be fairly flexible, very flexible, actually. My concern was, I heard you say the commission would review some of these. Did you say that?
As it's currently drafted, Chair, it does go to the board. And the reason we did that was kind of twofold. Perhaps the, because the board, even in the COVID emergency, the board has to ratify anything the chair does. And let's say the chair were to authorize a use and the use were to take place for a week, and then the board comes back and doesn't support that and doesn't ratify it, you would have this period of tentative approval that might present problems both to the property owner as well as to the board itself. So we thought it'd be best to consolidate this as a board decision and just do it one and done, as opposed to have the ratification process.
So I guess what I would say is, I don't see any need for the board to ratify those decisions you're saying they do, just really to protect. I guess, since there aren't that many, if it gets to be where there's a lot, then we'd probably make some changes. But for now, just because there aren't a lot of them, that's fine.
I just want to add to that real quick. I mean, essentially, it's not going to slow us down. It's going to take us a little bit of time to kind of vet these, working through public health, make sure everything's on the up and up, and before we bring them to you for consideration. So again, we're not seeing a lot of them, as you said, so it shouldn't be a problem in our flexibility.
Okay, thank you, Paul, and then Ken.
Yeah, I just want to move on. I just want to just clarify that the having some basic criteria is not in any means should not or desired or in my intention to somehow make it restrictive and take away flexibility. It's actually to protect us. So things like parking lots, things that such as everything that the staff just had mentioned. There's another one that staff had mentioned, that they're temporary. This is a temporary thing, and that when things go back to normal, that particular waiver is expired. So, and I'm also supportive of the language, that's in the document now, and having the board approve it. My concern, is again, frankly, that we treat everyone equally, and that from a liability standpoint, that a decision made by the board, we're more protected than if a decision not made by the board. And I don't want to get either the administrator or the chair or both caught up in a disagreement of something. So it seems appropriate that it's vetted and there is some framework or some basic criteria that allows that to happen. I think there'd be a lot of B2s that will not apply to our intention. So if our intention is spelled out in the criteria, then we're better protected.
All right. Anything else? Thank you. Thank
We-
you. Have a great day.
We need a
What
date.
date?
We need a date.
Do you want to extend the emergency till the end of August? Do you want it to the end of
August.
September?
August 31st or 30th.
Can do.
Good with that.
So you are on recess, commissioners. You will not be present to extend it. So I would suggest you make this expire either August 20th or September 12th. So there's
September
enough of their
12th.
recess.
September 12th.
Okay, agreed.
Excellent.
So, Stephen, I just had a question. If by chance a miracle happened and COVID disappeared, then we could remove the emergency, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay, just want to make sure. Not that I think that's going to happen, but you never know.
So it
Okay,
sounds
you
like
got it.
that the
Thank
board
you.
wanted some additional language, some additional measures in item number 14. Is that correct, or are you good with the current language as proposed?
As proposed, I am.
Okay,
Me too.
thank
It's
you.
fine.
That's all we need. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Dan.
So we'll bring to this Thursday's business meeting for you to formally adopt the addendum. So Steve,
Okay.
if you could update it and let Mary know, and we'll put it on the agenda.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Thank
Great.
you.
Any other COVID questions for Nancy or Stephen? Otherwise, we're going to move on to different topics. All right. Thank you, Nancy.
Right, thank you.
All right. But Dan Johnson Stay, next commissioners is C2C Corridor Plan Policy Group Appointment. Dan Johnson, please lead.
Great. Hey, good morning again, everybody. So real quick, we have, you've heard the word C2C in a couple different venues, one of which is actually a dialogue that started before Metro's Get Moving Together effort, which was a multi-jurisdictional effort to really analyze that corridor extending from Multnomah County north and extending south through Clackamas County, 172nd, 190th, et cetera. That's an effort that we kind of put a pause on while Metro was going through their Get Moving 2020 effort. And we're to a point now where we have to get moving forward on that project to get funding, to get our grant money. We have to actually have to produce the documentation required. A part of that requires that we have a policy group, which we are proposing to the board to support Commissioner Savas to participate in. And that's kind of what we're here today, just to make sure the board can ratify that and affirm that. And I'm not sure, Commissioner Savas, if you'd like to expand on that.
Oh, I just want to just say a little bit, is that back when I first came on the commission, I worked on a similar group with the Multnomah County, Gresham and everything called a NUMTUC. And I sat on a board then, or a committee then. And then following that, when Damascus was working on their transportation plan, I sat on the study that looked at 5 alternatives, and this was one of the alternatives. So I know that pretty well. I know some of the issues pretty well. And also want to thank not only our staff, but Happy Valley staff and C4 Metro staff, because a few years ago, I asked them to take a look at this and maybe we should get working on a plan to move this forward, knowing that Happy Valley was in a situation of growing, and that we could get this on a list of projects to be done in Clackamas County should any funding come available. So here we are, and we have a great opportunity, and I know Happy Valley is quite interested. And so just along that transportation lines, again, I just want to say thanks to all the people that made this come together.
So, sure. You asked, create the committee and putting Paul on, I'm fine with that.
So you want to need a vote?
Yep.
Do we need a vote?
Yes, please.
Okay,
Move to approve.
second. It's been moved and seconded to appoint Paul to the C2C committee. Any further discussion? Who's polling?
I will be.
Okay, Christina, go ahead.
Okay, Commissioner Fisher,
Aye.
Commissioner Humbertson,
Aye.
Commissioner Savas,
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader,
Yeah, I see a thumbs up.
I'm up.
okay, and Chair Bernard.
Aye, motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Dan. All right, next Please bring in Rich Swift, Jill Smith, Stephen McMurtry. So this is a revisit, commissioners, of the 2 housing authority items from your business meeting last Thursday. The approval of projects for Metro Affordable Housing Bond funding and approval of omnibus resolution for Webster Road redevelopment project. You asked several questions that staff has answered. They're happy to answer more questions that you may have today. This is on your agenda for this Thursday's business meeting as well. The goal is to get you the information you need that you feel you can make a decision this Thursday. With staff present, let's start with the projects for the Metro Affordable Housing Bond funding. Maybe if we can start, if Jill or Stephen, any quick updates you'd like to give since last Thursday, and then we can ask for questions.
I think that we just want to make sure that everyone had the opportunity to review all of the written answers that we provided. And then Rich was going to introduce the topic and take you through a few points before we turn it over to Stephen.
So I guess a couple of the main key points. The first is related to the LIS, the Local Implementation Strategy. And let me sort of start off by saying good morning to Administrator Smith, to the chair, and to the board. Related to the Local Implementation Strategy, the notice of funds available, the NOFA that we put out related to the different projects that will be in front of the board on Thursday, that NOFA was made in alignment with the LIS that was approved back in August by the board of 2019. And in that was a discussion about the different income types we were going to try and include and how that was going to be done. And so I just want to sort of reiterate for the board that we are in utter alignment with that LIS and the intent of that implementation strategy, and also the fact that that's been agreed to between us and Metro, and also that we have an IGA in place with Metro regarding that. Second, this is, the projects that are in front of the board for Thursday are our first real opportunity to begin expanding the development community in Clackamas County. So there are a lot of eyes on us in terms of this process, how it's rolling out, and this is critical and very important to our capacity and ability to go forward with projects as we move into our development phase. I can't underscore how important this is. So because when entities are submitting and preparing projects like we received from our NOFA, they spend an enormous amount of money, time, and effort to actually do the development of those projects. And so that's why I said all eyes are on us, because this is all about future development and how developers will see us as a partner, because they're not willing to put forward the types of resources and effort and dollars to do the development if they consider us to be high risk. So I'll stop there. And I guess what I'd like to do at this point is see if in the answers that we provided, was there anything that needs elaboration, or if there are other questions that need to be covered that we did not receive. Thanks.
Anybody?
I'm good to go.
So I couldn't raise my hand fast enough. So I really appreciate staff taking the time to do the written answers, and also talking with me yesterday. Stephen is a wealth of amazing knowledge, you guys, incredible, and really enjoyed the conversation. I was interested in reviewing the performance, which I got last night. And I do have additional questions, which I'm going to need to talk with staff about, which I can do offline. But my interest in trying to figure this out, and Ken, we experienced this back when we were baby brand new commissioners, and we were looking at the PEDCOR project, and I can remember all the questions that we had and going through that project. And I'm just going sort of through the same sort of analysis this time as well, and looking at where the money is, where it's spent, just making sure that we are being fiscally, financially responsible with this. And that's just our oversight role. And I don't have any reason to believe that we're not, but I just have more questions after looking at the performance. I want to make sure I understand all the acronyms and so on and so forth. And the other piece that I'm still curious about, I don't really have an answer. I have not talked to any of the developers on this question, but I do know that one of our proposals does allow for mixed income. I also understand from talking with Stephen yesterday that using the tools available, which includes averaging the cost of the rents, is more complicated, and it's a new process that's only been done by one of our developers in the whole state. One of the proposals does that. But I am still not quite understanding where all the real barriers are. And something that I would like the board to consider, I don't want to stop these developments at all. I don't want to. They're just too wonderful, I have to say. They hit the mark in just everything that we set out through our local implementation strategy. Except I would really like it if we could allow the flexibility for Stephen and Jill and Rich to continue to work with the developers to see if there's that opportunity. Obviously, they submitted proposals that in a week's time they can't possibly rethink, or if it's feasible or not, to look at providing up to 80% of AMI. I think we as a board were pretty clear that we wanted mixed income, and we want to make sure that we have, we didn't concentrate poverty. These proposals definitely are in areas that are really wonderful, that allow for tremendous opportunity through services and schools and Clackamas Community College and Happy Valley and parks. And I mean, all those things to placed in places that will create, provide for all of those goals. But that one piece is not available in two of the developments. I don't want to stop it, but I would really like to have us authorize staff to work with the developers to see if that's possible. And then just come back to us with a report as well, just so we can be more engaged. I, as a commissioner, when we're in the process of, granting public dollars, I think it's our role to stay out of staff's work. They know what they're doing. They do a really good job. But when it comes to making sure that the policies that we've laid forth are there, that's when we step back in and say, this is our vision for our community. And that's what we've done. And we can get a little bit more of the vision, that would be better.
Okay, Paul?
Microphone.
Thank you. So my questions, some of them are answered. I guess really, one being the geographic location, to make sure that the housing and the types, especially on the workforce, especially, so that their people can afford to live where close to their work, if they can't afford transportation, for example. And also make sure that the diversity in the counties, in the cities and so forth is as balanced as possible. So with that said, that's why I was willing to at least touch base with this, and knowing that the makeup, whether it's, per location or per structure, that mixture of whether it could be workforce and 60%, you've covered that in your responses. But one thing on the other item with regard to the omnibus is that I walked away with the impression, could be mistaken on my part, but I walked away from the impression and the response I got in the email that the target cost for the Rosewood Terrace, the Webster project, I'm sorry, not Rosewood Terrace, but the Gladstone the Webster Road project, Gladstone, was going to be a lower cost to rehab that building than would be to actually build an entire structure, standalone structure, which could make more use of the land if it was 2, 3, 4 stories. So I walked away with the impression on the first email that the cost per unit was $133,000. And got clarification on that. So thank you, Stephen, for your clarification. It was the total was more closer to 300 something, 330, 340, right? So what was the cost per unit for Rosewood for the PedCorp project?
You know, I believe, you know, I don't have the referential financial documents back, but I do believe that was $238,000 per unit is the, in terms of the overall financing package, the cost per unit. That's not the cost to construct, but it is the cost to finance.
Total development cost.
But I have to go back and look to see, but we can certainly get that number to you today, Commissioner Savas.
Well, I mean, I think if Stephen has any more information, do you have anything that you want to add to that, Stephen? Because I want to be able to feel comfortable about Thursday, and I don't want to wait. You know, we're here today for this particular reason, so I'd like to get as much of this on the table as we can.
I have no, thank you, Commissioner. I have nothing to add in further about Rosewood other than to echo what Rich said, is that we can get that information to you today. I'm inclined to believe that their total development costs were in and around there. You know, again, the only thing that I would say to that is total development costs. They're spreading total development costs over 100 units. We're spreading development costs in Gladstone over 48 units. So sometimes that can be skewed a little bit. It ends up taking those total development costs and sort of watering them down a bit. But I'm happy to have any conversations you'd like to about Gladstone, and if there's specifics about the information, or excuse me, Webster Road, specifics about the information that I sent to you.
Well, my point is this Stephen or Rich or everyone, and that is that in hindsight, would it have been cheaper to raise the building at Webster and construct a multi-level building to get more economies of scale to bring the price per unit down? That's my question.
Candidly, perhaps. The zoning, however, at that particular site, when I came on board at the county, this was underway, and you know, the zoning at that particular site would not allow for that. I would say this much, that you know, costs are always a tricky subject. It's always, frankly, in the work that I do, it's always a fairly emotional discussion, and it should be, because we're taking precious resources and spreading them as far and wide as we can. In this particular case, there are ways that I could say the acquisition of the building, coupled with some of the costs that we know are part of the land use process and the things that we need to do to the building to improve its safety, seismic wise, and also with any hazardous materials in there. You add those costs back into the acquisition cost, and you are still purchasing the building for a very, very good price to be able to get 48 units serving higher needs, higher barrier households at 55 and older in this community. So I'd leave it with that.
Yeah, well, yeah, okay, thank you. I don't want to bring the two issues back together, but I'm going to for sake of economics, and that is that the housing measure bond provides, and I just read your memo again, $143,000 per unit. That's what the Metro bond provides per unit. So the balance of the funding needs to come elsewhere, right? So in reality, we're going to be leveraging things like tax credits and all those types of things. So, and then obviously anything aside from the tax credits, that any other outside contribution from that would come from the housing authority, correct? You know, through the feds, not the FHA, but HUD.
Yeah. In this case, we have full project-based vouchers associated with it, which are part of the 200 that we allocated up for our overall bond. And then we also received permanent supportive housing money from Oregon Housing and Community Services, which we were one of the first ever pilot recipients of that money to be able to do this work, the intensive permanent supportive housing work there, as well as some weatherization money, and as well as an allocation of home dollars, a fairly small, modest amount of home dollars for the project. And then our own fee that we recontribute back into the project.
Okay. Well, I just want to remind everyone and just kind of bring this one point up, especially to Commissioner Fisher. And that is that I had a little bit of heartburn about how this thing came together, and I thought that the $143,000 per unit was not realistic, and we really couldn't build that many units, you know, based on how that measure was coming down, as I understood the math. So we are now forced, or we knew, and we are proceeding with this whole thing of leveraging tax credits, which is the very reason in which kind of disqualifies some of that opportunity. I won't say disqualifies, but basically rules out the opportunity to have, you know, 30, 60% AMI and workforce housing, all those things combined, because as you explained on Thursday, those scenarios don't really mesh very well, right? So by virtue of trying to fill the gap, we actually can't really have the flexibility we really choose to have. Am I making sense there, Stephen?
Can I respond to that? I was in all of those early meetings the year before the Metro Bond goals and before it went to the voters. And from the very start, all of the financial analysis and goals were assuming 4% tax credits. There's no way that we could achieve the number goals with just the bond. That was always the assumption, and that assumption aligns with the goals of the Metro Bond. They're meant to serve extremely low-income people. They're all flowing through housing authorities, and that is our mission. So the fact that we were able to persuade the voters to let us do 81 units in Clackamas County for people between 61 and 80%, that was something that we worked to get, but it was not easy. And it really doesn't align with the mission of the Housing Authority. And I just want to remind everyone of that. Our goal as government is to serve those who really aren't served well by the market.
Yeah, and I think that's one, thank you for that, Jill. I think that was one thing that was somewhat lost in discussion on Thursday. We really didn't really share. So that, I just want to just shed some light on that, that it's not as easy as us wanting to wish it so much as the realities of the economics.
Yep.
And that was one other thing I wanted to say, and I'm done. Ken has got, I'll come back. Ken's got something to say.
Ken.
Well, just in listening to Stephen and Jill on the financing packages that vary from project to project and from source to source, what I gleaned from all of that is that we have a series of objectives, but not every single project and every single financing method is going to allow us to achieve all of those objectives. So from my way of thinking, I prioritize our objectives. And my first objective is to get people under roofs. That's my number one objective. If we can then accomplish that objective with a mixed income group of people in a particular project, we should do that. If we can locate that project in a better area than just concentrating poverty in only one location or something, we should do that. But I think from my approach is you have to prioritize what your number one goal is, and each of the other goals are subordinate to that. You would try to achieve them if you can, but first and foremost, getting people off the streets and in a roof over their head is our number one goal. So without getting down into the nitty-gritty detail that Paul likes to get into, which is certainly okay, I think from a policy perspective, we have to think of it in those ways. What is your first priority as a board member or as a board? And then what are the following priorities, and how many of those can we meet in any given location based on the financing? So when I say I'm good to go, that's my process of thinking and where my priorities lie. And Stephen, Jill, yeoman service in getting us this far. And those will, for me, speaking for myself, going forward in subsequent projects, that's kind of where my priorities would be. First and foremost, we get them in houses. Then the other objectives follow if we can possibly do it. Thank you.
Paul and then Richard.
Yeah, so well, one thing you left out, Ken, I don't think it's as simple as having just one major priority and everything else falls by the wayside. I think affordability ought to be weighed in there considerably. And the more expensive things are, the less people are going to be able to afford to have roofs over their heads. So you have to look at it in a grander scale. So the part I remembered, I forgot, and that was, this is an important project. And when I speak to that, the Webster project, because that's the one that's closest, that was the pilot project coming out of the bond. We put a lot of energy into that. Where it's going forward, I get that. There's no, other than the cost being a heck of a lot higher than we anticipated, I'm not happy about that. I'll put that out there. Yeah, but I do want to say this. It's important enough, and I think we can learn a lot from this as we go forward, that I don't think having it as an omnibus proposal is going to allow us the opportunity to learn and express our interest in this project as well. So I just ask for consideration. And Gary, could you, am I missing something, or is it easy just to remove the omnibus aspect of this and allow us the opportunity to watch this to fruition?
It's entirely up to the board. The omnibus was simply to allow staff to be more nimble and flexible to move forward at your overall direction, but also we could come back to you at every step of the process. I mean, you have time to do that. It just puts the onus on us, but I can help facilitate that if that's the will of the board.
Well,
Great. Can Richard?
Sure. I guess two comments. First is I wanted to thank Commissioner Hubbardston for his comments, because he's exactly right in terms of how we're going to approach the different income levels we wish to target. And, page 12 of the LIS actually speaks to this. Actually, 11 and 12 both speak to this quite specifically. And what we're going to be doing is actually block by block when we get into a project like what we're going to be doing with the Milwaukee, the Manor, and the Hillside, because we're actually going to be looking at different financing structures block by block, so that we can look at a targeted approach related to unit types and where we're going to be locating. And so there is going to be see where you're really going to see the mix of income. The pedal to the metal really happen with that. So I appreciate those comments. And then related to Omnibus, the reason that it's packaged the way it is because of speed to sign documents. It's actually authorizing myself and Jill to sign documents as they're coming out of the Webster Road project. None of this will be related to anything the board has not already seen. It's basically allowing us to move quickly so that we can close on documents, because actually as that clock ticks, we may actually incur more expense related to document signing. So if we have to wait, I'm not going to say we will see an increase in soft costs on the Webster Road project, but the likelihood is high. So I just wanted to provide that advice to the board in regards to, and we use the omnibus resolution for Eastern Ridge. We also use it for PEDCor so that we could get documents signed. Anything that would be new or anything that the board has not seen or cost that the board has not known about, we would bring back in front of the board. And those were, obligations and commitments that we made to the board for Eastern Ridge and for PEDCor. So I'll stop there.
All right, I believe Sonia was next.
Yeah, so I'm all for being able to sign documents, move things forward. I'm also all for what Paul is suggesting and to have the board informed and more engaged on this. So if we could do both, that would be my preference. I think it's important. I've really appreciated the, and of course it's our development, so we have been more engaged in the project, in the development in Milwaukee. It's just one of the, it's very important. It's our number one priority as a board. The number one need in our community is dealing with our homeless and housing crisis, and it's just going to get worse as PEDCOR, not as PEDCOR, as COVID. Oh my gosh, what a Freudian slip. As COVID displaces people, we have got to be on the cusp and educated as a board on this issue. So I am absolutely in favor of what Paul is suggesting. And it may be just making it, when things are evolving, just an update on our issues, that we just have Stephen come and just let us know how it's going. The one thing to Paul, I was really concerned about the Webster Road development, in that, as we all know, the idea of putting all special needs populations together in one place is not something that I support. But in this development, the fact that the zoning did not allow to get rid of the building and to build a new one, that would have been very problematic. And the fact that we really don't have all those single room occupancy units, I mean, across our region, those were changed into motels or hotels. The capacity within the region for that very specified kind of housing just kind of went away over time, and we just need it. So I just wanted to make sure, which I'm pretty sure, and Stephen will be able to answer this, is that we are not concentrating certain types of disabilities or populations. At the Gladstone Webster Road, it is basically 0 to 30% of AMI, and it could be people who are older on Social Security that don't have the means to pay market rents, and we will be providing a diverse tenant population in that development. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. I mean, outside of the financing that I mentioned earlier, that from OHCS, which is for 11 units, to designate as permanent supportive housing, which is wraparound services with the site-based rental assistance. You know, the main criteria of the land use was that we're serving folks at 55 and older that has supportive services within the fabric of how we're providing those services with partnerships, and also within the building, which was also an expense. So yeah, you're 100% correct there. It will be open. We will have project-based voucher assistance for all units to really help out those who are the higher barriers, that have the highest need for the lowest ability to pay rent. So.
And I just have to say, after touring the location, once it is fixed up, it's going to be I mean, the structure, it's kind of historic too, because it was built at a time where it has that kind of groovy kind of feel as you go in the entrance, and sort of the community room. I just think it's going to be amazing. I'm excited. I would like to do some tours as the development is going on too, just because.
Yes.
It'll be quite something to celebrate, I think.
All right, so we need to finish up. Paul, go ahead.
Yep. So, Rich, Sonia's earlier comments with regard to doing both. Number one, removing the omnibus and allowing us to stay in tune with the project, and two, not impede any signing of documents is my goal. So I concur with that. But I did want to say one thing you did say, Rich, I have had some, I've been dealing the last 6 months with an issue with a family member. So maybe I missed a meeting, but I never heard or had any update. And again, I could have missed a meeting, and I have missed some, but that the cost ballooned on this Webster Road project. I knew it was going to be more, but had no idea until learning it on Thursday or Wednesday when I got the response back from the email from Stephen. Thank you again, Stephen, for that update. But those are the kinds of things that I think that are important that we got to be notified on. And I know we have a lot going on. Don't want to make things more difficult, but this is an important project.
Yeah, we can definitely provide timely updates on these things. we got caught in an increase in land use determination costs that we just did not expect related to Webster Road. And so the land use process and everything related to that just ended up being a lot more expensive than was ever anticipated.
Okay.
But we can certainly provide those updates to the board in a more timely fashion as we're finding out that things are changing related to cost.
All right. Okay, good. I'll leave it there.
So I'm a little confused. You said removing the omnibus.
Yes.
I'm not interested in removing that. So, Ken?
Yeah, I'm not interested in removing the omnibus, but I get the point about the board being a little more engaged in some of the things, especially when there's changes. I'm going to call it rule of thumb, call it what you want, but when a project goes 100% over what the initial number that we had, which is 143 to about 300, that's a doubling of the cost. That is something that should have come to our attention right away. 10 or 20%, I get that. You're making estimates. You're trying to figure out what costs are going to be. But when you're looking at a 100% increase in the cost, I think that would be a good example of the kind of thing that it would have been advantageous to you and to the board to have that come to us in advance. That would, and it's that kind of a thing that always raises red flags for people. So,
yeah.
But I am, as I said at the beginning of this, ready to go forward. I want you to get this job done and get those houses and that housing done and people under shelter.
So I got a question for Gary. How do we accomplish what Sonia and I seem to be in agreement on?
I don't know. I mean, if you take away the omnibus, that means every document has to go before the board for approval. And Rich just suggested, while we can make every effort to do that, that may mean increased costs for this project. Because right now you meet twice a week, commissioners. You could retain the omnibus and I will ask Rich and staff, every time you sign a document, you email the board. Tell them exactly what you did and why you did it.
We could do that.
That'd work.
Can I just clarify real quick for and I want to be clear. I just want to sort of point it out for the record. Our bond per unit, Commissioner Humberston, has always been targeted at 143,000 per unit of bond use. The total development costs on Webster Road have increased by over $100,000 on that project, but it has not gone from $143,000 to the 380 something that we're seeing right now. It's gone from around 266 to the 383 that we're seeing now.
Oh, okay. And I see how you're breaking it down.
That was I would certainly, and to Rich's point, there are a variety of factors that impacted that. It's not an excuse. We've also had COVID that slowed down our process, even getting our land use approval and getting some of these final costs. So as Rich and Jill both mentioned, we will come back regularly, give regular updates to this if that's what the board would request, and be happy to do so.
Stephen, please don't take it as an accusation. It wasn't meant that way. And there's an expression that I like, and it just escaped me at the moment. So when it comes back, I'll I'll put my hand back up. But no, oh, I know what it was. Is controversy's fine, surprises are not.
Right.
We can live with controversy. We make those decisions all the time, but surprises are not fun. So if we can avoid those, that would be good.
Hey, Commissioner Fisher, we need to finish up.
Thanks. I raised my hand to ask Stephen to clarify what he just clarified, to make sure we had it on the record what was the correct increase. But then I thought of another question. So the goal is 143,000 per unit. Is that a Metro imposed goal, or is that our own goal?
Well, it's math that we've done from the beginning, is to say that with the allocation that Clackamas County received from Metro, that $116.2 million in our 812 unit requirement, dividing that in comes up to a maximum bond allocation per door that we'd want of 143,000. Now we know that as we go forward, if we have efficiencies in some area, for instance, we can bring projects forward using less bond per door. That gives us the flexibility to pursue maybe what I'll call, for myself, higher mission projects, like Webster Road or others should they need that additional bond allocation. At this point in time, we're not anticipating the need for the additional bond allocation because of the sources that we discussed previously.
All right. Thank you. So
I'm
the
sorry,
goal is both items will be on the consent agenda on Thursday, right?
No, so they're going to be discussion items on Thursday. So there will be discussion again with the board and you. If I may clarify on the omnibus, so I'm going to put Commissioner Schrader on the spot here. So I've heard 2 commissioners say no omnibus and 2 commissioners say keep the omnibus, just more communication. So Commissioner Schrader, what is your position on this?
Keep the omnibus and just get us more updated information as time moves on. That's what I think we need to do.
Okay. All right.
Gary, just one point. Every time that we are looking at signing anything related to Webster Road, I will provide, or Jill will provide an update to the board, letting folks know as much as we can in advance. We will do this in advance of signing anything. We will let the board know that we are going to be signing particular documents related to Webster Road and what those signings mean, and related to finances if we're obligating any finances. And again, as I said, anything that's new related to Webster Road that has not been in front of the board before, we will absolutely bring before the board before we do anything.
Okay, thanks, Sonia, and then Paul.
Yeah, Gary, I just wanted to make sure I wasn't in favor of removing the omnibus. I was just in favor of more communication. I don't want to do anything to raise the potential of raising costs due to delay. Interest is expensive, and we all know that time is money. So I just wanted to make sure that's on the record. Thank you.
Paul.
I want to make it just perfectly clear. I'm not interested in finding out which documents have been signed or impeding any documents from being signed. That's not my interest. My interest is being updated on the project, and anything that's out of expectations or not in alignment with what we've been told in the past, and a sizable increase like this, that's a lot of money.
Yes.
It should have come to us. That and I'm looking for the security, frankly, however it's done, that we get that. And again, my interest is not about micromanaging this project at all, but something that increases the cost $133,000 per unit, multiply that times 48. That's a lot of money.
All right, so you got your direction, correct? All right.
Yes, correct.
All right, thank you.
So thank you, Rich, Jill, and
Thank you.
Stephen. This is on your agenda Thursday, commissioners, for your approval. So if you do have any other questions, please let me or staff know before Thursday.
Great.
So,
See you Thursday. Thank you.
Thank you.
Clearly we're not going to finish the issues list by 11:30, but we do have time after the last policy session today at 3 p.m. But I think we can get 2 more done quickly here. First, business meeting agenda review for this Thursday, July 23rd. You will have a COVID update, which will include extending the emergency declaration that you just discussed today. You have the Housing Authority Board, 2 items you just discussed. They will be discussion items, not a consent agenda for Thursday. And then you have another lengthy consent agenda for the regular board. There's nothing that was controversial. One, though, was the IGA with the state of Oregon to accept the reimbursement for COVID funding. So we hope that will get done and we can get our $5.6 million from the state on our first round. Otherwise, nothing else appears controversial to me. If you do have questions, though, if you'd please let me know prior to Thursday. Next, I'll ask Drenda, if you could please give a quick update on the draft response letter to the Milwaukee City Council, 2 councilors regarding a letter they sent to you. Drenda.
Yes, thank you. Commissioners, you received a letter from Milwaukee Council President and another councilor requesting, well, I think you read the letter, but a concern with the services the county provides to unincorporated areas. Emily Klepper worked with Chris Lyons to draft the response letter that you had in your packet, and we'd like to have that sent out by Chair Bernard.
Everybody good with that?
I've got a concern. One thing that's I like the way the letter's crafted, but it needs to have one thing added, I believe. But there is a mistaken assumption, both in the third, fourth, and fifth paragraph of their letter. And basically is that it's making the assumption that somehow out of our general fund or some source that is shared, some shared source, that we are building or would be funding sidewalks with some shared source that the cities are being deprived of, and in essence that they are subsidizing it. That is woefully untrue or inaccurate. Maybe inaccurate is the best word. It's more mistaken. Now, I think it's clear if they're paying a monthly street fee in Milwaukee and Milwaukee's spending that street fee on that, and their citizens are paying for those, that's fine, but we don't have that kind of a source for sidewalks, okay? And I confirmed with Dan Johnson yesterday that it's correct that the only monies that build sidewalks are gas tax revenues or MTIP or those kinds of resources that everyone is eligible for that are derived from gas tax, vehicle registration fees, so on, so on. So we need to put a paragraph in there because they are of the belief, and I'll just read it, we are, frankly, fairly convinced that those of us living in cities are subsidizing urban services. Well, I will tell you that every time this has come up for that finger has been pointed to Oak Lodge or Jennings Lodge, that's inaccurate. There is no subsidy. So I would like to know if there is, what subsidy they're referring to, because Oak Lodge and Jennings Lodge do not drain any funds from those cities. Oak Lodge and Jennings Lodge stand alone, pay for all the services on their own with their taxes. So there needs to be some kind of language in there. So all I asked for is a slight adjustment to that gets to that, and talk to whatever you want to confer with Dan Johnson from DTD, but something needs to be in there because I think this went out to all the cities, open letter that went to all the cities. I don't want people, and I want to make sure our response goes back to all of those that were sent out to, but I want to make sure that's clarified because I don't want all the counselors and the mayors in Clackamas County thinking there's a subsidy when there isn't. Now, there may be a subsidy somewhere out in the region or in Clackamas County that I'm not aware of, but the reference to Jennings Lodge is specific, and that's not accurate. That needs to be remedied right away.
Ken?
Well, really, the question is, they appear to have made an assumption. We don't know the basis of that assumption. With all due respect to Paul, he's at this point is making an assumption, but we don't have data to support that these assumptions in either direction. So and I don't know whether we do or don't subsidize any aspect of unincorporated area with incorporated area. And I don't have any data that says that we do or don't. My question is, do we want to get into an argument over that, or just make the point that the decision to incorporate or not incorporate is the citizens who live in those areas? It's their decision to make. We can assist them, we can encourage them, we can do all of those kinds of things, but do we really want to get into an argument about whether or not there is a subsidy going on or not, and how much research would it take to establish whether there is or is not a subsidy going on? That's why I'm just wondering if we're making an issue out of something unnecessarily.
So my response is not to address overall subsidies in general, but at least on the sidewalk issue, confirmation with Dan Johnson, we don't use general fund. We don't have a monthly fee in which Milwaukee residents are paying that money is being diverted to Jennings Lodge. I think the state, just the fact that at least on that aspect, and that sidewalks are not proposed to be funded by general fund. They are funded by gas tax revenues paid for by the people who live in the unincorporated area. That's their money. And by the way, that we don't even get our fair share of, by the way, historically. So that, I don't want, you're right, I don't want to get into an argument. And the fact that this was sent as an open letter to all of those, maybe, I don't know, that's an important clarification that needs to come out right away, because this will become an argument, and being silent on it means we accept it, and silence is acceptance. I don't think we should be silent on something that's clearly an error of assumption.
Well, if I may, Mr. Chairman, so we get gas tax that comes in, and then the road department makes decisions with our guidance and policy decisions on where and how that money gets spent throughout the county. Is it cleanly and clearly separated that the money from the gas tax in the unincorporated area stays in the unincorporated area, and the money from the gas tax that is raised in the incorporated areas clearly and cleanly stays in the incorporated areas? If there's a clear separation, then I agree with Paul. But if it's all in a bucket, then, you know, figuring out that division of funds would be burdensome, to say the least.
Yeah, it is a state policy. It's called 50-30-20. 50% of every gas tax dollar goes to the state, 30% goes to the counties, 20% goes to the cities. It's clearly defined.
Okay.
And maybe you can put that in the letter. Maybe, I don't know. I'm just suggesting we need to address that. Leaving that unaddressed is not good. Not a good idea.
Putting that breakdown in might be helpful.
Yep.
So with that addition, would you be supportive of the letter?
Absolutely.
Sure.
I can live with that.
Sonia.
Yeah, I was just going to say, yeah, I think we need to clarify. I appreciate Paul bringing it up, and I agree.
Okay.
Will you authorize us to make the change and send it, or do you want it to come back to you next week?
You're just going to be quoting the state statute, right?
Right.
I'm good to go.
Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind just seeing it. I don't want to hold it up, but I don't mind seeing it. There's not an urgency, so I don't see any. Won't take me but a few minutes to read it over.
Yeah, and I would like to see it also.
All right, show it to us before we go out with it.
Okay.
All right. Thank you,
Thanks.
Gary.
All right, let's pause here and we can finish the rest after the second policy session today. So that's it for the
Okay.
morning.
All right, we're done. See you at 1:30.